Good evening, everyone. I'm Erin Burnet, out front tonight, live once again from Iran. I'm in the capital, of course, of Iran, in Tehran tonight. It is election day, and the polls here closed at 11 o'clock p.m. local time. Right now, it's 3:30 a.m. There was hope there could be some results, an early rumor, pretty soon, but they're going to come in sometime in the next day. We should find out whether this goes to a runoff election or not. Voting was extended a little bit later tonight than had been anticipated. A lot of people voted today. The Ayatollah, the supreme leader, voted this morning. Of course, there was a whole press gaggle that went with him to film him formally casting his vote. We're not yet sure, of course, who it was for. He had said, though, earlier in a headline that was captured in this country that high turnout would be a blow to the enemies of Iran. The enemies of Iran, of course, being a very direct reference to the West and to the United States. And you know what? It seemed like that worked. There were plenty of people who were out there and you know, perhaps a little bit of a last-minute interest in voting. Today is the weekend, and we saw long lines at the polling stations we visited, and we saw that early in the day. We also, though, talked to people who said they weren't voting at all. They didn't want to talk about it on camera, and when we asked why, they said it should be pretty clear why we don't want to talk about this on camera. But they were very frustrated and said, what's the point in voting at all? Frustrated with the lack of change that they saw in this country. Today, we also saw some of the world's most expensive luxury brands, and we saw them here, and they were very nice stores, and they were clearly the real deal. Bulgari, Escada, Tag Heuer. We saw them all. Ermenegildo Zegna. You even had those fancy Italian brands. Yes, they were all here. We also today had a chance to speak to some women. Now, when there were a lot of people, 686 people originally running for president, there were women on that list. None of them actually made the cut from the Supreme Council and the Supreme Leader to actually run for president of this country. Well, we asked some women what they think about that, and we'll share that with you. But as I said, the government really wanted high turnout. They wanted it to make a point to the world, and they're going to report that they got it. And I think it's fair to describe it here that people felt patriotism and they felt pressure when it came to voting. Here's what we saw. The line started early, with people waiting in the boiling sun to cast their vote. This polling station, a mosque, transformed for the day. Here's how it worked. Voters must bring their national ID card and birth certificate to vote. A utility bill just doesn't cut it here.
The vote has two parts.
Yes.
On the left, you write the names of the person who comes here to vote. Okay, name, surname, the date of birth, national code, the name of the city, the name of father, and these things. Okay, this one.
This here is where I fill out for president.
For presidency, yes.
Farr is in charge of this polling station and insists it's practically impossible for the government to know who a voter picked.
So we can't find that this is for this person, okay?
You can't find that out?
We can't find that out.
Okay. The majority of votes at this middle-class polling station seem to be for the mayor of Tehran. Mohammed and his son Faisal came home from Kuwait to vote for him. Can you tell me who you decided to vote for?
Oh, Mr. Ghalibaf.
Mr. Kalabaf.
He's a very good man. I love him.
Yes.
He's a great man. He did change the city.
The Supreme Leader's words influenced some people. High turnout for election will dash enemies' hopes, was his front page headline in the Tehran Times. Maybe this headline is why the people we talk to who aren't voting wouldn't talk about it on camera. They say they voted before and nothing's changed. So what's the point? It wasn't just Mayor Kalabaf who got a lot of buzz today. Another name we heard a lot of, reform candidate Hassan Rouhani. When we visited Tehran's Tushal neighborhood north of the city, some of his younger supporters were enjoying their day off in the mountains. Did you vote today?
Yes, I did.
You voted? And who for?
For Rouhani.
Rouhani?
Yeah, this one.
That?
And the purple one. Yeah.
Purple nail.
Yeah, the purple man.
But Elham wasn't hopeful. She told me she doesn't think Rouhani will win. We wrapped up our day at this polling station in a conservative neighborhood of Tehran, and we did find some people voting for the most conservative candidate, Saeed Jalili. Layla Zare told me why she voted Jalili.
Because of the hijab, God willing, he will make it stricter.
Still, even the most ardent supporters all told us they believe this election will go to a runoff. And they believe it'll go to a runoff. Now, to win outright so that there's no runoff, a candidate would have to have 50% plus plus one individual vote to actually win and not have this go to a runoff. As I said, everybody we spoke to thinks that it will go to a runoff. We're going to get the results within the next 24 hours or so. And if there's a runoff, it's going to be next Friday. Well, joining me now is Steve Inskeep. He's the host of NPR's Morning Edition. And of course, here it's very early. I guess you're used to getting up at these hours.
No big deal to me. Yeah.
No complaints from you. All right, well, we were just talking about a little bit about what we saw. We did see, at least here in Tehran, enthusiasm, lines. The mayor of Tehran was very popular here. What did you see today at the polls?
Well, I was interested that some people seemed to make up their minds at the last minute to actually show up. You mentioned earlier that some people were determined not to vote. We talked with some voters who said, you know, last night we were 50-50 and we decided to show up. I also heard the word several times, change, Erin, sometimes spoken in Farsi, sometimes spoken in English. You know that American political consultants talk about being the candidate of change in a time when there's trouble. There's a lot of trouble in this country, and the people who want change seem to be going for Rouhani, who's the most liberal candidate in a very conservative place. There were people who turned out hoping their vote can change things.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. You really did see that, and we saw that. Some of the younger voters for Rouhani. What was it like for you covering this? And I wanted to share this with our viewers because we were having this conversation before about sometimes people flock over and they want to talk to you.
Oh, yeah.
But with those people very quickly come authorized or self-appointed security and police forces.
Absolutely. Those are two things that go together over the last several days. We were told that the people were very, very depressed, very sad about the situation here. But as soon as I showed up, and I'm obviously not from here, people come to me, and I was in the bazaar just a few hours off the plane, immediately drew a crowd of people who wanted to tell more and more intense stories about things that had happened to them. A woman talking about her son who had been imprisoned and tortured, one story after another, and then we were stopped by the police because there is massive security here. I was outside of a campaign rally on Monday night, and you walk outside, there were hundreds of security people uniformed in plain clothes along an iron fence. This is everywhere in Tehran, everywhere else we've been able to go, really intensive security.
Really intensive, and I think just to try to explain it to people what it's like, you're there, and we're not from here, right? So you don't necessarily recognize who's who and what's what. And then someone comes up and they demand your papers.
Yes.
And they might be a formal, someone who worked for the supreme leader at one point came up to us, or it might be someone who's informal, and then all of a sudden they're filming what you're filming because they want to turn the video in.
Yeah.
And as a journalist, you have the people have fear you're talking to, but you have fear too because you don't want to jeopardize those people.
Yeah, I finally got impatient in the last 12 hours or so, and there was one guy who demanded my papers. I demanded his. He didn't take to that very well. It turned out to be okay. But there are people, who seemed rather threatening. There are also people, I think, who are just afraid themselves of failing to catch something because then they would get in trouble. There's just a lot of fear in this country, but also a lot of courage. People are speaking out when they can.
Yes, and on that front, I'm sure you had people who, even when they were aware, very well aware of who was filming or who was following you around, and we weren't aware, they still wanted to talk to you. And they still wanted to tell those passionate stories as sort of, you know what, go ahead. Bring it on, because I want to talk.
Which was a bit of a surprise again, and maybe that will be reflected in the election results. We don't know who's going to win, or even if we're going to have a winner in what may just be the first round. But there certainly was a lot of interest, and we did see, at least in the polling stations that I was able to go to, an increase in turnout through the day. Light in the morning, and then heavier and heavier, and lines at the end.
Yes. All right. Well, Steve Inskeep, thank you so much. And for those of you who listen to Morning Edition, and I'm one of them, you finally got to see Steve Inskeep. And what a pleasure it was. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Steve Inskeep, of course, live here in Tehran, covering this election for NPR's Morning Edition.